say interfaith and interdenominational conversation about, the more I'm struck by its resonance. I think part of what I hear in the idea of shalom is that I guess I'd say a better world is both a spiritual project as well as a material project, right? That we're called to, as I said, help the orphans, help the marginalized, help the poor, but that our tradition teaches us that we can't do that if we ignore the wounds in our own hearts. We can't do that if we ignore that of God in our own souls and our own bodies. And one place I find this really resonant is in the Beatitudes of Matthew's Gospel, that I think offer these powerful pairings. That if we want to be children of God, we must make peace, and we must make peace not only with our neighbor but with ourselves and with our communities and with the land. And that to be on God's side requires us to mourn, requires us to be meek in the face of the fallen world. That if we want to actually feel sated, we have to first hunger and thirst for righteousness. So it's the world needs to change, and we need to change. And I feel like that's part of what's going on in this right relationship. The other thing that occurs to me about shalom is I mentioned before, what I love about the Christian tradition is that I feel like I get to sit under this cloud of witnesses and learn from so many folks. And I wonder if one synonym for shalom might be what Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community, which was how he articulated what he was working for, which was how he articulated the world he believed God was calling us to, a world where structural violence would be overthrown by the force of love. I feel like that ideal motivated King to resolutely stand up for justice when he was surrounded by injustice. It inspired him to work really hard to love his enemies, even when they were incredibly unlovable. Treated his family, treated his movement in these terrible, violent ways. This idea of the beloved community gave King the courage to stand up, not just against racism, but also against militarism, against poverty, against global systems of oppression. I think what King teaches me is we know we don't live in the beloved community, that we haven't achieved God's peace, but we hold that goal and we let it transform us so that we can transform the world. You asked particularly about land. King did a lot of amazing things, and his last work was in Memphis on an environmental justice project for garbage workers. But he didn't do a lot thinking about land, as far as I know, a lot thinking about the world beyond human beings. But lots of people who learned from him did. And one of the folks I've studied that I am most moved by is Cesar Chavez, who led a nonviolent movement inspired by King, also did nonviolent organizing and would talk about beloved community. But because he was organizing farm workers, he talked a lot about healing of the land as well as healing of economic systems, and that we have to get our relationship right with, as he would have said, Mother Earth, if we want to get our relationship right with each other. And Chavez is the second national strike Chavez led for grape workers against grape growers was all about pesticide and all about what was being done to the land and how that was hurting human health and the health of the land, and poisoning water and land and air. And one of Chavez's big speeches on that movement was in 1989 on the campus of Pacific Lutheran University. So just one more go Lutz. And that, I think, connects this idea of beloved community, maybe this idea of shalom, with real care for the land and right relationship. And again, it's about healing ourselves as much as it's about healing the world around us. And it's about a faith that we can't do one without the other. And we will do either better when we're paying attention to both. So I wonder if one thing just to emphasize about shalom is that it's in every direction. It's pointing out, it's pointing in, it's pointing up and around to God, but it's also pointing all around us to our neighbors and one another. And I hope that that spirit can inspire us to keep doing better work, just like King did, just like Chavez did, and just like all the folks you're working with are doing.
So when we started this cohort, this idea of shalom was new to me. And so, I mean, like he said, he hadn't really heard it in his faith traditions either. And earlier on, he talks about attending many different denominations. So does anybody have any just initial response to this passage? Okay, guess we'll go on.
To be talking to you in this format, and I'm glad other people will be able to see it, but there's also something kind of missing because it's a little two-dimensional, and that's because place really matters and presence really matters, and sharing ground and sharing food and sharing air makes a difference. And I think that's because land and place are part of community. One last biblical way I like to talk about this. Jesus says that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there among them. And I think a word I didn't used to think much about that is the where. It's not when 2 or 3 are gathered. It's not if 2 or 3 are gathered. It's the place, right? Jesus says, I will be in the place where 2 or 3 come together. And that, I think, is an invitation to treat our places as vessels for the Spirit, vessels for God, vessels for peace, vessels for shalom. So, I mean, I guess you asked for an invitation. I think if we want to honor land, if we want to be stewards, we need to be partners with land, and we need to be partners with everyone who's in community with our land, with our place. Of course, that means the church community itself should have something to do with the land. People should know about the place and know about its history and know about their ecosystem. I think it also means the church should be in dialogue with their neighbors, who's around, who's not part of the church, and how are they in community with the land, and what can we learn from them? And then this gets even harder, but much more important. The indigenous people who cared for that land for millennia before settlers arrived, I think, ideally are part of any conversation about what community means in that place. For many of us in many places,
Phil is going to share some more with us here.
Thank you for staying and for being part of this dialogue time. And Hans, I would like you to be a runner in just a moment for the microphone, and if maybe one other person could be a runner. Jeremy, thank you. Would you put up the slides, please? Slide number 2. There we go. Pastor Jean has made copies of these. Is that right?
Not of these. They've been
Not of
hanging
that.
out, though. This
Okay.
is for the later
This
one.
is called the sacred encounter and sacred communication. It starts, the sacred pause is to reflect. Well, we have been, as we've been beginning this process as a team, we have been under the learning sacred unveiling, where we've been learning what does it mean to be entrusted with land by our God. What does it mean for our community? And our team has been a couple times in person with 7 other congregations that are going through this very same process, most of them in the Puget Sound area, but beyond that as well. And that's to learn about what are the causes of land misuse. And we've studied a lot about how racism has played a huge part in that. It's evident in the Albina area in Portland, where racism, since the land was valued at less than other places, the freeway went through Albina, and it displaced the community there. We learned about ways in which land has been a blessing, and some of the congregations that we are working with shared ways in which land has been deeded to communities, even to Native American communities, for use in behalf of the whole community. There are a couple of areas in Portland that have done exactly that. Anyway, in this learning part, we have done a lot of reflecting as well. If you move across to the sacred pause, and in the sacred encounter, we are listening. I think as a team now, we've had one-on-one communications, sacred encounters, with about almost 24 of our congregational members. And we have on our list more congregational members and also members of our community, such as the Kaiser organization, such as the Vancouver City planners, other people that are around us. We've also had sacred encounters with the local Native American tribe upon whose land we are caring for what they cared for centuries. We have met with them. We've been to a powwow with some of them and learned a whole huge amount about the ways in which they care for one another and for the land. Would you move to the next slide? On the left side is what traditional ways of thinking about property rather than land or earth. Property is what I own, but as you heard from the speaker from Pacific Lutheran, stewardship is we are caring for the land that God owns. So we move from thinking about this is what we own, we can do whatever we want to with it, to stewarding the land, from ownership to stewardship, caring for God's good earth, and moving from scarcity and a mindset of, oh, we don't have enough, to trusting in God's abundance and seeing what God has for us. And then moving from the mindset of doing for someone else, which is the mindset that oftentimes has been part of the colonial nature of how the United States began. You know, we were a colony of England. And so that mindset of doing for the Native Americans, they're savages, so we've got to do for them. And we know, of course, what's best because we think we have. Moving from that, from doing for to accompaniment, walking with our brothers and sisters. And that's part of our learning, is recognizing on the left side that status quo. And on the right side is moving more to an understanding of God's gifts, God's abundance, God's land, earth, stewardship, and accompaniment. We have been doing this now for how long? 6 months?
6 months.
6 months. And
Now 7.
7, yeah. So a lot of this is new, and some of it is amazing learnings, but we wanted to share with you part of our process. Okay, next slide, Zan, please. The faith land cohort grounding basic principles are anti-racism practices and land stewardship, coupled with sacred organizing. If you can read that, it says a relational and faith-rooted method we use to build collective power to make changes in our communities. And I think in many ways, Vancouver is doing that, having homeless people be on discussion groups that are looking at how best to overcome homelessness, paths through homelessness to shelter. And then in the center, the community discernment, the process we say yes to in community as we move towards God's vision of shalom, which is peace with one another, with God's beautiful earth, with God's own self, and all together in community. Now, I know that that's a lot, so if you have questions. Question and answer period starts now.
So, well, and about the sheet that was handed out, it ties into two of the slides. And some of these we all saw together when Joey came a year ago about. And so it's moving from a way of doing things when we know exactly what's needed. That's the deciding mindset. And then moving toward a discernment where we acknowledge we don't even know what we don't know. And so it involves all those things that we saw on the slides. So I saw I better tie in the handout to it too. All right, so now we will have the time of running with a mic so that people can hear one another, each other's questions. So I know that Hans has one. And Jeremy has another right here. I think Hans is going to make it faster. You just have to hold it really close.
I applaud what you're doing. Okay, now? But somehow I've missed a step. Has the congregation or the church council on behalf of the congregation officially declared any portion of the land that we hold in custody surplus to our future needs? Has that happened?
So the word surplus, that makes some people uncomfortable. So what we learned is that when the offer was made on the land, that we have a resource we hadn't considered. And so part of discernment is figuring out what God is leading us to, how God has given us stewardship, access, and responsibility, and what does that mean? We hadn't really thought about it, and so part of this is the learning in it, so it's not a decision of any sort being made yet. At some point, there will be a decision whenever and it'll take as long as it takes. So when you have the Holy Spirit involved, it doesn't work so well to say, oh, it's going to take X amount of time. It's the Holy Spirit guides us in all sorts of different ways and brings new learnings and opportunities. So we don't know, and no one has an assumption about what will happen as part of this. So.
Let me see if I can give that a shot a little bit that might make sense. Prestige saw a surplus of land behind our church building, and they wanted to do something with that surplus of land. This process isn't looking at just that piece of property. This is about all stewardship of this entire space that our church currently occupies and discerning how in the future God would like us to, what God would have us do here and be here. And whether that ends up being a surplus or not, the discernment process encompasses this entire piece of God's earth that we occupy.
And
Does that help at all?
yeah. And basically, they saw an underused amount of property given needs. So I wish they had never used that word, because that has insulted people. So thank you.
Hello. I just want to say that the land we have right now is very important to this community in the state that it's in, and it should never be developed. I would like to state that fact right now, because it's a green spot in a area of asphalt, and it's very important that we keep these green spots to keep wildlife, gardens, and carbon dioxide release absorbed by the greenery that we have.
And we have a lot of different opinions that are in the congregation, and so we're hearing from different people, and that will continue. Again, there's nothing on the table right now. It's other than discernment.
Hello, I'm Charlie. I'm a part-time member and would like to ask I just understood that something transpired. Someone made an offer on this piece of quote-unquote surplus land. Who was that? Who was they? I'm sorry I'm behind, but that's my question.
About a year and a half ago, a developer approached us about purchasing the property that about half of the land that is currently stewarded or owned by Beautiful Savior. And the intention was to build affordable housing. And then it came through their process to be affordable housing for seniors. And they were building it for the city. So a year ago, we're just around then, a little bit over, the congregation voted to explore other ways, or just look at all the different ways that land stewardship can happen. And because that proposal pushed us toward a decision instead of a discernment, so now we're in the discernment. Yeah. And people get a little nervous about the word discernment. It's like a discovery process. And it's about God, not what we want, any one of us. It's what we as a community discern in relation with God. And I know that's hard to wrap arms around, and I know that some people think it means the opposite. Discernment is about God.
Pastor, I have a question. Who actually owns this land and this church? Is it Beautiful Savior? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's the congregation.
Is it Beautiful Savior that owns this church and building and land?
The congregation. Yeah. Any other questions?
In this discernment process, Pastor, you referred to the fact that we were going or were considering selling part of the property. My feeling is this property is so valuable that it should not be sold at all. We could use that property, and I was thinking about has anybody discussed leasing property that we own for the future?
So at this time, there is no talking about selling it or leasing it or redeveloping it in particular. They're all possible options that could be done or explored sometime, that could be explored, period, and at some point a decision made. But each of the possibilities, and there's lots. There's a lot of different opinions and thoughts and imaginings. Right now we're in creative imagination time. And so at some point there will be a decision of some sort, and it won't be an end-all decision for the rest of time unless it's sold away. But, and even then it's not an end-all decision. We're not there yet. So originally, when we were responding to an offer, at its best, and this is what Joey said a year ago, at its best, a congregation discerns together, discovers together, and then if they discern about selling, then they explore options with somebody. So we were thrown out of the more comfortable, even then it's not comfortable, but the typical and best practice way of moving forward. So we're just trying to get back into that, is forget that anyone came in and offered. What do we need to think about and discover together about this land, and the stewardship of it that we never even thought of, because we hadn't thought of it as a resource. Yes, we had different portions used for different things, but we weren't thinking about it as part of our ministry, of an active ministry, and how to move forward and do what God's calling us to do in this time. In the past, it was considered more, but not in this time.
What do we do if we have an idea or a discernment? What's the process of bringing it forward? Do we get up and shout it out in church, or do we quietly go to this committee and say, this is what I feel?
Oh, we're not a committee. We're like a little exploration team, or a team that dedicated 6 months to getting trained, and then now trying to use some of that with the congregation. And what we are hearing, and we're not ready to share that yet, that at one of the future forums, sharing it more fully, because we wanted to ground everybody with this, is that there's a pocket of people that see this thing, and there's a pocket of people that see that thing, and a pocket of people that see this thing, or just have an interest in wondering. And that's what we're at. We're in the wondering time. And so one of the things that we expect to come before too long is to have people interested in joining together with others to explore whatever the possibility is. So I know when it wasn't this team's forum, but the council forum, there was a lot of interest in having somebody come talk to us about from the indigenous community, okay? That's not a decision about them or whatever. It's not saying we're going to give them back the land, although there are congregations that have done that. But it's learning from and reconsidering and imagining and what are the potential partnerships and how to honor and respect our connections with the community. So, and they're one part of the community. So that's what it'll be. So it's not oh, well, I want to do this or that. If at all possible, if you can let go of the I want to, it only to be this, And then even if it's your area, just kind of do some research, some experimentation, some learning about how whatever it is might enhance, vitalize our congregation. And then also, where's God in it? You know, I know people think, I've heard that some people think I actually am talking about me. I am not God. And I know it, absolutely. So none of us have a full sense of God. And one of the other things with ADHD is that I get excited about a lot of things, and I see possibilities in a lot of things. And so anyone that thinks I have one way forward, you don't know me. So, and as we talk about them, there's a lot of exciting things that we get all like, ooh, this sounds fun. Well, I think we all have that, not just me. Yep. Oh. Oh, we're doing one-to-ones. You can ask to have a conversation with any of us, so Heidi or me or Nancy or Phil. Thank you. And again, it's a conversation that we're just seeking out what's on people's minds, hopes and dreams and all of that.
So it's still really in process, and we're still wanting to have many more conversations or these sacred encounters with many people. We've started, but there's a long way to go. We've got a big congregation. We also have a big community, and so we've been focused really primarily on the congregation, but we're starting to also have conversations with people within the community. Like Pastor recently met with a couple of the school systems in our area. So just listening. So we're still really in this listening phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of ADHD and listening, I thought I would throw something else at you, and why not, right? We're going in multiple directions here. I know I'm relatively new to this congregation, and this is only the second meeting like this that I've been to, but I kind of want to say the same thing I did at the last meeting, and that is, in terms of developing on the property, like you said, I feel like we can still develop on the property without taking away, right? It's not just buildings and parking lots versus grasses and gardens. I like the idea, since Beautiful Savior's already doing an effective ministry for the homeless, and that personally touches me, by the way. I spent some time on the streets too. That there are probably better ways, right? There are probably better ways that we can minister to the homeless. Already it's pretty great, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday through the winter months. But what if, and this is just a what if, right? This is just like, what if the balance is between developing something that is small in that area, something that we do independently, not for the city, not for the county, not for assisted living or anything like that, something that we do to better give the homeless, to make our ministry to the homeless better, without taking away condos, without putting up parking lots, without doing all that stuff. We can still keep our property the way it is, but and I'll just give you one example, and then I'll stop talking because I've already monologued for quite a while. One example is these 3D printed homes. They're really awesome. They're really tiny. They're when they're done, it's just one room, right? But we could have something really simple like that out here, giving them a better, an upgraded experience from the Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. It just makes sense to me because of my personal connection to it, and because we are already doing that ministry.
So we're at a very beginning part, and yes, weighing in on things and sharing like that, and then we track it. We have this nice little spreadsheet that Heidi pulled together, I think, right? And we're just trying to watch what we're hearing, and then from that, where are the directions to send some folks out to learn more? And a lot, I tell you the truth, a lot of the ideas, they are in conflict with one another. That doesn't mean they need to be. It means that we might have to think creatively how some of them could come together. So, yes, Chuck.
Hello, again, I'm Charlie, and as a sort of a part-timer, but for some time, we've been about 3 months a year, and we've been at Beautiful Savior since 2004. So I kind of feel like I only have a toe in the water to speak for this congregation or ask questions, but be that as it may, I like what the gentleman just said about perhaps not selling the land, but doing something ourselves. But again, that's not the only way. But something that's occurred to me is at a point in time, perhaps 5 or 6 years ago, Beautiful Savior was planning to rebuild or expand the worship space of the church. And coming in and out as we do, my wife and I, we perceive that membership has declined. I don't know that to be the case, but perceive that membership has declined, and so maybe that plan. I think that's why the plan was tabled or abandoned. But my point, I guess, is not knowing the future. I hope that the development committee gives a healthy consideration to preserving sufficient space for that possibility. Thank you.
So if everyone is all right with for this being the beginning of and ending of, so for today, to move into prayer, because we said we wanted to keep it at 45 minutes or so. And yeah, I think we're getting there because I forgot to pay attention when it started. Well, we'll probably be on. Anyway, and it's an ongoing, no specific timeline, although we do want to show action and movement forward so that people don't get frustrated about just spinning. So it's a somewhat amorphous path. It is hard to totally define and predict, which makes it uncomfortable. And it's the reality of our world that innovation and adaptation, adaptive leadership, adaptive decision making are required because our world is so changed. And our reality is so changed as a congregation compared to where we thought we'd be in 2024. You know, if we were 5, 10 years ago, things just have kept going on. So we have to figure out who we are in this time and place, and it'll go on. So discovery and experimentation perhaps, and learning and imagining together and adaptively or innovatively or whatever, seeing how things come together that we wouldn't have ever thought before might be possible.
So I thought we would just close with a prayer. This was, it's called the Oscar Romero prayer. He actually never did speak it, but it was written by Bishop Ken Utner of Saginaw. And it was a homily for Cardinal John Dearden. It helps now and then to step back and take the long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom lies beyond us. No statement says all that could be said. No prayer fully expresses our faith. No confession brings perfection. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the church's mission. No set of goals or objectives includes everything. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they are future, that they hold the future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces far beyond our capacities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and to do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builder and the worker. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of a future not our own. Amen.
Thank you all for participating, and please add your voice and be ready to explore.